What's up, guys? Mermaid story time. We are back with another story, and again, it's from Slezor's channel. Again, I found this story on this dude's channel that I put all his information in here because, like, I obviously have to give him credit. So, guys, if you're into these sorts of stories, the weird, the wonderful, the woo-woo, the spooky, cryptid, whatever, go and check out the guy. Go and check out Slezor because you probably would be interested in his stuff. And these stories, allegedly true stories, okay, allegedly true encounters, were sent in by viewers anonymously in order for him to read them out. And so I'm going to reread them out on my channel. And I've chosen these because, as you know, on this channel, I do a lot of water-coded material, okay? A lot of information on things to do with aquatic beings. And I chose this particular story when I heard it, again, not just because it's about aquatics, but when I listened to the end, I thought there was a bit of an interesting flavor that, whether it's true or not, it does bring up questions that I particularly think about when it comes to aquatics. Now, if you've been around here for a while, you'll know that I don't particularly believe in mermaids in the way that people are led to believe mermaids are. I believe that what we are dealing with here are, yes, there could be another species. Yes, they could have their spiritual elements and, you know, more of a spiritual basis to some of the beings. They're not all a monolith. But I really heavily believe that a lot of these beings are interdimensional in nature, which kind of doesn't really narrow it down much because a lot of things are interdimensional. But what I mean is it's not like Disney, all right? And I think a lot of things, as we know, the ocean is incredibly undiscovered, as we are told, okay, of different types of beings that could be, in fact, residing under the sea. As they say, sea is the new space. Not really new, but sea is akin to space, all right? If we think about space and what is going on beneath the surface of space, what is going on beneath the surface of the waves, it's not only fish women that are swimming around down there, right? I think there's more that is going on, and that's the reason why I chose this story. So this story was sent in to Slezor. Now, it's a guy that decided to call himself Kevin. Now, Kevin was not unknown to the sea. He worked on cargo ships. He did a lot of work working on cargo ships, transporting cargo, funnily enough, between Netherlands and other parts of Europe, as well as the Netherlands and areas of the United States. And it was on one of these transatlantic crossings that this experience happened, in the worst storm that he had ever experienced while on board a boat. So fast forward, we don't need to know any of the beginning parts of what was going on in the boat on this story. We just need to know that we got to this one day, and on this one day, this horrific storm hit. All right, we're talking 50-foot waves. All right, the cargo ship was being bashed from left to right, bouncing up and down in waves like it was like a basketball or something. And it was coming to the point that the people that were supposed to be, you know, you're supposed to be on deck, you are strapped. You are supposed to be harnessed to elements of the deck on the boat so that you don't get swept overboard. But this storm was so great that the captain himself was starting to get sketched out and started to put on the tannoy. Everybody, like, unhook yourselves, bunker down, because it was just too great, and he didn't want to risk losing any lives for people going overboard. Kevin was in the middle of trying to disengage himself from the harness that he had on the surface of the ship when this huge wave just crashed over him, and he said it felt like needles. It felt like the shock of the icy water as it hit his body, and it went all into his waterproof gear that now is not waterproof because it went in and it stayed in. It kept the water in, literally. Caused him to hyperventilate. You can imagine the ice, you know, when we talk about what happened in Titanic and how they must have felt when they hit the cold, icy waters of the Atlantic that are said to be well below, and I'll put the figure up here. This is what he felt as it washed over him, and it almost caused him to freeze to the spot. It took everything in his being to move and to actively try to disengage himself and get himself inside and down the stairs, well away from the top deck. Immediately, they were met by the ship's medics, like trying to check them over and stuff. In fact, he was even talking about his close friend on there was literally crying because he thought that he literally was witnessed. He thought that he had witnessed his best friend die. He thought that he had been swept overboard. And so there was so much panic. There was a lot of chaos that was going on amid this, even though they were seasoned. When these things happen, it still happens, all right, it still hits. Now, the strange thing that he said is that as he was sitting down with one of the medics, 3 crew members that had come off of the boat of the deck walked straight in and straight past the medics, straight past them, even though the medics were calling them, like, hey, come sit down, we need to check you over, let's get you sorted. They literally just walked straight past, and Kevin was just like, what the frick is all that about? Because he said that usually the the relationship between the medics and the crew were fantastic, because they knew that these people were the ones that saved their lives. They always spoke well to them whenever something happened. Nobody was ever like rude, even if they were like in states of shock. People were always communicating. But these three guys walked straight off of the deck and walked straight past them. And this was incredibly confusing to Kevin, not just because of that, but also because the two guys that actually did that are two guys that he knows quite well, and who he says are incredibly pleasant, lovely guys, and he had no idea why they were acting like dickheads in this situation, basically. You know, maybe they were in shock too, but he just had no idea. So as I said, shit was crazy, y'all. Kevin himself was in so much shock that he ended up drifting in and out of consciousness. But about 3 hours later, he managed to come round, and he was feeling much better, much stronger, much more like with it. Now, considering the rank that he had on board, he couldn't just completely rest at that point. He was quite high up. And considering that he was still being told that there were some people that were refusing to be seen by these medics, it was upon him to track these guys down and to see exactly what was going on, because it was really confusing. So as I said, it was the captain was just so confused as to why these three guys just completely ignored the medics and seemed to have just walked past and just went into deeper parts of the cargo ship. So now Kevin is out on the lookout now for these guys, because he needs to get them checked out. He needs to make sure they're okay. And as I said before, he actually was good friends with a couple of them. So let me read that down here just to quickly remember. So 2 of them were in their 40s, all right, and 1 of them was in their late 50s, and they were like nowhere to be found, all right. They ended up having to search the entire ship, literally, and eventually they came across them. So Kevin is tired, Kevin is exhausted, Kevin should be just resting and just dreaming of good life, but he's not. He is walking the bowels of this ship, and this is taking a long while. And eventually he goes into a very deep place in a part of the cargo ship that people don't really go into, but he's having to check everywhere. And it's when he gets to this part of the boat, this is where everything starts to go left. This is where the experience really starts to happen. So the first guy that Kevin comes across is the one that's in his 50s, all right. So he comes up behind him, and he can see, as the guy hears him approaching, that he can tell that the guy's a little bit surprised that he's kind of found him there, all right. But Kevin just starts walking up to him, and he's like, what are you doing? What are you doing down here? You need to get your ass back up, because you need to get checked out. Okay, he didn't really say it like that. I'm saying that, but you can hear what I mean. And the guy just sort of stands there and stares at him. He just sort of looks at him for a second, and Kevin in that moment is like, something isn't right here. It just felt very strange, all right. And he's been working with this guy for months, so he knows this guy like very well, but he can feel like something is not quite right. It's like he says that it looks like him, but it doesn't exactly look like him, all right. He says that there's slight differences, like he said that the eyes are kind of a little bit different, and the nose is just a little bit different, all right. It's like he couldn't understand why. He knew this was the guy, but he couldn't understand what he was experiencing, all right. So by this point, the medics have caught up to Kevin, all right, because he was obviously in communication with them, and they're asking, all right, sir, can we now do the assessment of you? And he doesn't say a single word, this dude. He just gets up and sidesteps and walks straight past them. At this point, Kevin's getting kind of pissed off, because he's like, why is this guy being so rude? Why is he being so rude? All right, he goes after him. The medics have got all their bags, they've got all of their stuff. And Kevin literally catches up to this guy, and he just taps him on the shoulder, and he says that this is where the most terrifying experience of his life kicks in. All right, the guy didn't turn around and beat him around the head with a bat or anything like that. He said that when he tapped on his shoulder, okay, the guy whipped his head around and hissed at Kevin. Now, it's not just the fact that he went or whatever. It's not the fact that he just hissed. He said this guy's face, who he's known for years, all right, looked completely different. He said that his appearance it was like his face took on a very almost scaly, reflective look. Yeah. He said that this guy had fangs, all right, canines. He said double, if not triple, the size of humans and the guy's own natural teeth. And again, it hissed at him, all right, hard. It hissed at him hard. And he said that he remembers feeling the most intense push as this guy just slams him in the chest, pushes him backwards, and just goes flying. Literally, like Kevin goes flying, and this guy just sort of like runs off. And Kevin's like, is this really happening? Or am I still delirious from like being hit with that wave of cold water on the deck? Am I hallucinating? Well, nah, that happened because he could hear the paramedic or medic shouting, right? The crew member that he's chased that just ends up running. Kevin is like going after him, all right, and he gets back on his feet, and he has no idea what's going on, but he's chasing him, okay. And at that moment is when the man overboard alarms come on, and he says that his belly hit the floor, because everybody knows what those alarms are for, and it's the one thing that they dread hearing, all right? But that's what was going off right then. It's clearly it was being set off. So it says here that, next, you got all the medics running up the corridors with their bags. They are like legging it to the top and to the other side of the ship, and they're looking for these other guys, all right? So now they make their way to the front of the cargo ship, because as they were looking for these guys, they had gone into the sort of the deeper depths of the ship, but they're coming back to this, more of the front of the ship. And Kevin goes towards the captain's, where the captain was, all right? And because now they're wondering who the hell went overboard, right? Who went overboard? Because nobody had gone overboard before. What's happened? So Kevin went and turned up to where the captain was, and he noticed that the room was in total panic. The captain's face looked drained of all colour. The captain then spoke and said that he saw the crew member that Kevin had just put his hands on the shoulders, okay? And he said that he saw him run up on the deck, past the containers and up on the side of the ship where the railing was. The captain said that he saw all of this within a flash, all right? He said that that crew member came running up from the depths of the ship. This must be when, after Kevin had tapped him on the shoulder. And he ran like lightning, unnaturally fast, sped across the area where the containers were, almost zigzagging. He said it was like he was going at the speed of light. It was unnaturally fast, okay? And he said that he saw all of this within just a few seconds. And he said that the crew member just stood at the edge of the ship and looked down into the sea, all right? Almost just like waiting for something. It was still stormy, it was still horrendous, all right? And then all of a sudden, and this is the bit where it's going to sound batshit crazy, right? He said that the captain said that what he saw, he just can't, discombobulated, all right? He just can't put this two and two together, all right? Completely disconnected from this. He said all of a sudden, what he could only describe as a being, like a mermaid-style figure, a woman, a female, leaps out of the body of this sailor. Literally, like leaps out, like we're talking like Sam Beckett quantum leap type situation, like leaps out of the body and leaps over the side of the ship straight down into the ocean. I swear. When that happened, he said that the crew member, whose body now was just, possessed, whatever, collapsed. Just collapsed onto the deck. He fell backwards, luckily. The captain could not understand what he was seeing. He was completely, it was complete, what's the word? It's a disconnect. Like, he couldn't reconcile what he saw with what he saw, all right? He saw that, and without knowing what to do is why he decided to sound the man overboard alarm, because he just didn't know what to do in that moment. The idea that someone had just jumped overboard, what he saw jumped overboard, it just was too much for him, all right? It's a surprise that the captain is even saying this to anyone, but he's saying this to Kevin on the set because Kevin was of a higher rank at this point. But he said that the captain realised in that moment that he saw something that he would never be able to understand, okay? Never, or explain. The fact that he saw a crew member run up unquestionably fast and essentially like a female, a lady with like scaly skin or whatever, just like leap out and dive into the ocean, all right? But the interesting thing with this, as opposed to some of those other stories where people just like absolutely never talk about it ever again, the crew apparently in this story talk about this all the time, literally. This happened years ago, so this took place I think in 2008. And it says that for many years after this happened, they talk about it all the time, whether it's online, they still meet up regularly, they go for coffees, which is really funny, like all these hardened fishermen gonna have coffees, I don't know, like Starbucks life, it always catches us, okay? So they talk about it all the time because they just want to understand or guess what they saw. They don't know if they were all seeing things that night, but one thing that the captain found really interesting was that is what Kevin went through when he heard what happened to Kevin about when he put the hand on his shoulder, because it doesn't make sense, but at the same time it made sense with kind of a bit of what he saw. And so, it closes off to say that there are a lot of mermaid theories out there and a lot of sailors, and we hear a lot of stories of sailors that see a lot of things, and they talk about the high strangeness that happens on the high seas, a lot of things that they don't talk about when they come back to land, or us landed folk, land-loving folk are not privy to. But that was what Kevin experienced on board that cargo ship. Now, the first thing I immediately think of, like I said, we take it with a pinch of salt, all right? And I have to play devil's advocate. Like, immediately when I saw that, I'm like, oh my God, this sounds so much like what happened in the TV show Siren, all right? Where Levi and all of that came on board and were like attacking the fishermen, but they were attacking the fishermen. They weren't shapeshifting. So essentially what this is saying, if we're going to go by the story, is that I'm imagining that when all of this happened, and the waves were crashing on shore or on the boat, is it that there was this sort of like, did these beings essentially jump into and possess the bodies of these fishermen? And if so, why were they, what for? Why were they then walking into the deep recesses of the ship? Is this giving like The Thing? You know, if you've watched John Carpenter's The Thing, where it's just kind of like these beings act as parasites and slowly infiltrate like these, like the ship, and they would slowly use the people for food or for an energy source, or they had another meaning. Like, why would they actively then go? Why would they do this? Is what I'm saying. Like, right? That's what we want to know, sort of thing. And why would then just somebody putting a hand on their shoulder make them abandon the plan, right? And the hiss, and go back. All right. So now we're dealing with shape-shifting aquatics. And now this is why I wanted to put this on the channel, because even if this is just fiction, I actually have heard things like this before, and I don't think it's as far-fetched in terms of the theories that I was talking about of interdimensional beings, because I personally am water-coded, okay, and I do feel a lot of connection with things and aquatic information. Like, I very much hold a lady of the lake archetype, where when I'm immersed in water, a lot of my communication comes in, and I feel my most at home. All right, I feel also my most connected, if you want to say psychically switched on, when I'm immersed in water. Everything's on and popping. But in my water-coded travels, so to speak, when I feel connected and I sort of feel that I'm connecting with information that sort of comes in, and I have to be very discerning about what I experience. So I never say anything, even now, in concrete, but is that A, there's multiple different types. B, they are not all malicious, okay, or nefarious. And C, it's not just this fish woman. And a lot of, in fact, some of the that I say just downloads for the specific purposes of the video that I was getting were actively more reptilian. I don't even say that, but like, you know, what would be considered very snake-like looking beings. And we don't have to go very far in history. Myth always gives us a little bit of truth. Like, what do people call things like the Bible? Sea serpents, all right? Also, if we look at the mythos and the mythology even of Medusa, now in one of the iterations of the mythology of Medusa, because there are a few different origin stories for her, but one of them is that she actually was born a Gorgon, and the Gorgons were essentially a form of they were sea beings. The appearances that they were giving them, so to speak, were, you know, not just snakes in her hair, but like a snake-like serpentine body. All right, so this isn't something that is like being pulled out of people's asses here. All right, so this is why it's these particular type of these stories that actually draw my interest, because I think that it would be more traditional or more of a trope if it's just like, oh, it was this really gorgeous woman, right? Half fish, big-breasted woman, you know. But when I hear a little bit of nuance, even, you know, I pay attention as well. And so this is not the first time that I've heard of this type of situation. So I think that it was worth listening to anyway. And these, it's worth mentioning as well that storms, it's not just because things get dragged up from the bottom of the sea and, so to speak, come onto the surface, because this isn't just dead information, but the kinetic energy that storms bring up and that storms produce can cause what I consider, all right, is it can lead to, if you're into these sorts of things and you sort of you're into the sort of the, I guess, the paranormal, or the way that sort of spirit works and stuff like that, it can produce energy that can allow manifestation, so to speak. The energy, like you hear of hydrokinetic energy, like water, people make energy from water. Like when storms hit, like all of the components of the storm can cause all of the right kind of like elements to kind of happen at the same time, that for certain beings can actually serve as a form of a propulsion, or it can actually serve as a way to actually manifest stronger than maybe usual. All right, using the energy, using the I'm not very very sciencey, but using certain elements of the storm to their advantage in order to like these situations happen. And that's why if you listen to stories like, I swear to God, like fog, I really want to do videos about Lake Michigan. You know, it's no wonder that in horror movies, the trope of like fog rolling in when sort of creatures start to manifest, or when we're seeing like things that are happening in storms themselves, like crazy goings on in storms, it's not just because of the mood setting. It's not just the pathetic fallacy of all of those English literature heads out there. You know exactly what I'm talking about, and you're not. And people that might be out there like, what's pathetic about that? Google it, all right? English literature heads know what pathetic fallacy is, but it's not just, I'll tell you anyway. Pathetic fallacy is when you're kind of setting the mood in a story. So, you know, when you're talking about like if you were heartbroken and you were sitting near a window writing in a diary and it's raining, the mood, the way that it reflects how one feels inside and what the situation is, it kind of adds to the emotion of it. So basically, when you're watching horror movies, fog rolling in, storms, it all adds to the tense, like the fear, the atmosphere is what I mean by pathetic fallacy. So most people might think that storms in these situations, these stories, is just pathetic fallacy. 9/11 on the clock, that's the endings, and you're beginning to do with doorways walking through them. So it's a case of no, it's not just pathetic fallacy. All right, I think that storms actually serve a very scientific and very real, valid purpose, in my opinion, in these situations. They may be allowing for portals to open, is what I'm also basically trying to say. All right, so we don't know. It adds, the energy kind of gets ramped up a little bit. So when you think about these experiences and you hear a storm, don't just think, oh, they're just trying to create elements to make it more exciting. Maybe they are, but these things do have basis. So that's the reason I wanted to do this story. So once again, that story I got from the channel of Slezor, and if you are interested, go and check out his work. But also, don't forget to leave comments here if you like my style of storytelling, or if you want to hear something specific, please let me know. I also would love to read your stories. So if anybody has stories or things that they think people won't believe, or are a bit out there, or any theories or anything like that, please comment down below, because I will never I will never scoff at that. I really want to start talking about my own experiences just as living life as an embodied Axis Mundi, and half of the things I experience are crazy, to the point that I think I don't experience much. And then I realised, wait, I do. It's just that my threshold for weird is so high that I don't realise that I am experiencing a lot of crazy things. But anyway, I hope you like that video, and I will see you in my next one. I think I don't have a recording schedule. I just film and just churn them out whenever I find them interesting. But I am doing the Diary of a Mystic mini-series, where I'm talking about what it is to be an embodied Axis Mundi. Hopefully you might hear elements of yourself in there if you are one, or even if you are not one. You'll just get some good information from it, because we're talking about consciousness as a whole anyway. And also these weird and wonderful stories, because everything is connected. Okay? So until then, I will see you soon. Take care of yourself. Bye!